In consideration, oh, thanks, Chief, or Emily. In consideration of the ongoing COVID-19 health concerns, we are offering the option for the public to participate through Zoom if preferred. Instructions on how to attend virtually are included in the City Council calendar item listed on the front page of missionks.org. The public is also invited to participate in the meeting. If you are participating through Zoom, please either add your comment in the chat feature and it will be read out loud, or note that you would like to speak and we will call on you shortly to make your comment verbally. Please remember your comments or questions are visible to everyone in the meeting. If you are part of our in-person group tonight, please raise your hand but stay seated and we will call on you to go to the lectern to make your comment. When you make your comment, please state your name and city of residence for the record. Also be conscientious of others trying to speak and speak slowly and clearly. This meeting will be recorded and posted on the city's website at missionks.org. Please contact the administration offices at 913-676-8350 with any questions or concerns. Ms. Randall, will you please call the roll?
Loudon.
Here.
Chosey.
Here.
Kring.
Here.
Inman.
Here.
Davis.
Here.
Thomas.
Here.
Boltinghouse.
Here.
Right, heard is absent. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. We will now proceed with our agenda. Our first item of business is public comment. Is there any member of the public who would like to comment now? We all good? Okay. We'll now proceed with our regular agenda. First, we have a presentation on a proposed 17-unit townhome development at the southeast corner of 58th Terrace and Nall Avenue. Mr. Scott, will you please introduce the developer to make the presentation?
Mr. Scott Koenigsdorf is here this evening. He is a home builder here in the Kansas City area, and he has recently purchased the lots that make up the south side of West 58th Terrace, which is a short street west of Nall, just behind or just north of Johnson Drive, kind of behind those businesses along Johnson Drive, like Sully's and the Wing Stand. East of Nall, excuse me. Yeah, I'm sorry. East of Nall, you're right. Been a long day. It's been a long week. And for a short week, it's been a long week. So I believe there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lots that make up the south side of West 58th Street, just kind of around the corner in Nall going south. And he's purchased all of those lots. And he is proposing to build a townhome development. The properties are currently zoned planned business park and MS2. So like we did with the 58 Nall project that was approved by the city council last month, we proposed doing a rezoning of those lots to downtown neighborhood district D&D. And then of course, approve a preliminary development plan for Mr. Koenig's project. So without any further ado, I'll introduce Mr. Koenig this evening, and he can kind of go over more details of his project and answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Well, that's the submittal. Yeah, that's something else this afternoon. Yeah, something else this afternoon. I just got it this afternoon. And that's okay. Just the PDP to submittal is fine. Yeah. So let's start with the elevation view then. That's just fine. So my name's Scott Koenigsdorf, and I live at 4722 West 68th Street in Prairie Village. That's right down the street at 68th and Nall. I built a similar small townhome project to this in downtown Overland Park last year, or I should say completed it last year. It took about a year to build, maybe a little less. It was 18 units, very similar in styling and layout to the project that I'm proposing over here. The units, you know, as far as zoning, I guess in general, the land will mostly be a down zoning. There's some residential lots that you could do multiple things with where we will be increasing the density, but definitely down zoning from commercial office potential. I plan to keep this property as a long-term investment. I will plan to keep living in the area, and I build homes in this area as well. And really would like to do a few more of these around town just for a long-term investment. Let's see. The units themselves are about 13 to 1,400 square feet. They're 2-story. It's a mix of 1 and 2 car garages, mostly 2 car garages that are tucked behind the front facade of the building. So you will not see those from Nall or 58th Street. I found from the other project that it appealed to a variety of ages of people. We thought that maybe older people wouldn't like the stairs, and we thought that maybe the younger crowd would prefer a high-rise apartment and not something like this that's more like a home. And really, I got a wide range of renters, so I think that's a good thing. Do you mind pulling up the other, like the aerial plan of the development? Okay, so this is the overall layout and unit layout. They're, you know, residential style. So the height and massing is that of a 1.5-story house. Also, there's really no big exterior parking lot. There is some pavement in the rear to turn around to get in your garage. But the idea would be to park on 58th Street or in your garage. We have a few guest parking spots that we added in the updated PDP plan, and they're to the east of that little parking enclosure. But the idea is really to either be in front of your unit or in your garage. They'll have private trash service that'll pull in and collect the trash in the back. We plan to increase the number of street trees in the front yard in front of each unit, add a sidewalk on the south side of 58th Street, and then also install a fence all along the south side of the project from Nall over to, I think that's Birch. That's about it. I don't know what questions you guys might have.
Lighting, what kind of lighting will you have near there?
So primarily the lighting will be building mounted and down facing. I'm doing a lighting study, and that'll be submitted with the construction set of documents. We may have 1 or 2 down lights in the rear parking area that will not shine on the neighbors. But primarily the plan is to have building mounted residential style on the units.
So these townhomes are rentals, they're not for purchase, is that correct?
That's correct. They'll all have separate meters, and the tenants will pay their bill. They'll be all electric and for rent.
What kind of, Councilmember Thomas?
Thank you.
Yeah.
What is the anticipated rate that you'll charge for rent?
I'm thinking around $2,250 a month now. And that's, so at 1,330 square feet, which is the average size, that's about $1.69 a square foot. That's quite a bit lower than the locale or similar projects in downtown Overland Park. That's probably 80% of what they charge. However, there are no amenities here. There's no pool, no weight room, this is for somebody who could own their home or maybe currently does and now wants maintenance provided.
And is it 3 bedrooms?
2 bedroom, 2 bath.
2 bedrooms, 2
1 or
baths.
2 car garage.
And just one more question, if I can, Chair. Brian, I'm just trying to get my bearings here. This is kind of a grassy vacant lot diagonal from where 58 Nall will be, and then Roland Park's directly north of this development, right? Right across the street on 58th Terrace is Roland Park. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Roland Park.
They're like commercial homes.
The homes on 58th Street, the north side of 58th Street on Mission. Homes behind are Roland Park. So the city limits is kind of the backyard.
Okay.
And the homes on 58th Street, the north side are all businesses. Homes kind of look like a housing project.
Sure.
Protection business.
Thank you.
Councilmember Boltinghouse.
Thanks. That was one of my questions. And also, are you pursuing any sustainable building practices, or can you speak to that at all?
We're going to do, programmable smart thermostats, smart exterior water irrigation, bike racks, increasing walkability to some extent by adding sidewalks, sitting benches. In general, there'll be typical residential construction. I mean, nothing over the top that's super wasteful. And there's no common areas to heat or cool or anything like that.
Councilmember Davis.
So the maintenance is going to be your maintenance of the entire area, right?
That's correct.
The building. And can you talk a little bit about the trash? How are the trucks going to get in and out of there for the trash removal?
We're going to have a common trash bin in that enclosure on kind of the south side of the lot, and the service will just back into the south, dump it, and leave.
Okay, there's sufficient clearance for that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then we really only need that turnaround area for the trash because the fire can be served by Nall and 58th.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions for the developer or Mr. Scott?
I have one. Have you
Councilmember
done
Fritz.
any single home rebuilds in Mission?
No, I have not. I went to Shawnee Mission South. My wife went to
did too.
East.
I did too.
We live in Prairie Village. I used to live in Fairway. For whatever reason, I seem to only build in Shawnee Mission East on that corridor. That's just like our bread and butter, what we've done in this little area over there.
Okay, thanks.
So I noticed that units 16 and 17 are kind of separated. So
Mhm.
where will their trash be, or will they haul it all down their line?
That's true. I forgot about that. They'll have bins in their garage.
Oh,
that'll
okay.
be
So
the
they'll
one thing
just
that
be
guy will
picked
have
up
to
on the
get.
street.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the big reason for that, there's a large sewer line that runs in between units 15 and 16 and a bunch of overhead and underground utilities.
Gotcha. So that's why they weren't attached.
Yep.
Councilmember Davis.
I just want to say that this project really fills a housing need in the area. I really appreciate the fact that you're bringing this forward.
Thank you.
And this middle housing area is something that's sorely needed. So thank you.
Okay, no further comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
As a reminder, this item will be heard by the Planning Commission at the July 25th meeting and will likely come forward for council action at the August 17th City Council meeting.
And just to note, there's a neighborhood meeting that's scheduled for this project for next Wednesday evening here at the community center at 6 p.m. I believe that was in your action or your information item summary.
Just like a quick correction, it'll actually be heard at the August Planning Commission meeting and considered by you all at the September City Council meeting.
Okay,
So
thank you, Mr. Scott. Okay, our first action item this evening is the acceptance of the meeting minutes from Emily Randall.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to just submit those for review. Thank you.
Let's
Recommend-
accept them.
Recommend consent.
Okay. Consent agenda. The second item is consideration of a contract award for HVAC and mechanical systems maintenance at the POWELL Community Center with Penn Almany.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So as you know, the Facility Conservation Improvement Program projects have concluded here at the community center. We're now finishing up the punch list. The HVAC pumps and control systems are all under a 1-year installation, excuse me, warranty, and several year mechanical warranty from the manufacturer. That's provided that all of the preventive maintenance is done by certified technicians. We don't have a certified technician on hand. So MMC contractors who installed all of the equipment does have certified contractors as part of their team. They submitted a bid to do all the preventive maintenance, not just for the HVAC, but for pool pumps, hot water heating systems. And they have all the certifications necessary. They've been very responsive throughout the entire Facility Conservation Improvement Program and have responded to all of our questions. So they submitted a proposal, one for the period July through December of this year for preventative maintenance program, and then one for an entire year beginning January of 2023. So one of the differences between their preventive maintenance program and ones that we've adopted in previous years was obviously it includes all of the elements that have been upgraded here at the community center, whereas the previous preventive maintenance system or program maintenance was just the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. So a little bit more comprehensive. That previous cost was $13,374 annually. This new contract that they're proposing from July through December is $14,855.57. And then one for an entire year is $26,688. So in terms of our budget, we obviously have not spent any in that line item for an annual preventive maintenance program contract because all of it was being installed. So we have that 13.3 set aside for contract, and then we could easily absorb the remaining difference into this year's line item. So one of the reasons, like I'd mentioned, in addition to more systems being included in that preventive maintenance program, there's also a little bit of a surcharge for increased market supply and demand factors. So staff is recommending approval of both preventive maintenance contracts to begin as early as July of this year and continue all the way through December of 2023 for an amount not to exceed $41,543.57. And that will be funded from operations line item here at the POWELL Community Center. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Did we receive any other bids on this, or was it going with the installer?
We did not, because they were the original installer.
I recommend consent.
Okay. Everyone okay with consent?
I'm happy to give one this evening, but pretty much 8 to 6 any day I can help you out. You're welcome.
So consent it is. Okay. Thanks, Penn. And you're up next with Mohawk Park Inspection Services. Consideration of a contract award for testing and inspection services for Phase 1 improvements at Mohawk Park.
Phase 1 of 2022 Mohawk Park Improvement Project is ready to proceed to construction, time we've all been waiting for. The design contract with SFS Architects includes some construction administration services. It does not include all of them, specifically on weekly and biweekly inspection elements. So the success and longevity of a project really depends on adhering to those plans and then following up with the subcontractors and making sure they're following the specifications. So quality control is very important to us. We don't want to have to, put in a new system, lay new concrete, and then have to rip it out because it wasn't up to specs. So the scope of services that are provided through this bid is special inspection and testing for earthwork, lab, soil, and aggregate, shallow foundation bearing soil, cast in place concrete, reinforcing steel, structural masonry, hot mix asphalt paving and observation, and then post installed anchor installation. There's also some technical consulting, preparation and review of reports and invoices, daily reporting, communicating non-conformances with our project manager, utilizing industry report tracking software so that we can at any point ask for a report or progress on certain elements, and then maintaining non-conformance logs. Excuse me. Terracom provided the initial testing as part of SFS contract design elements. So they reached out to them for a bid, and Terracom proposed delivering on the scope of services for $16,365. And that'll be paid for Parks and Recreation sales tax funds, which is included in the Parks and Recreation Capital Improvement Plan. Staff is recommending contracting with Terracom for these additional services in an amount not to exceed $16,365. Happy to answer any questions.
Ben, questions or comments, discussion? Is there a recommendation?
Consent.
To comment.
Okay.
Thanks for your management over these issues, whether it's an item by item or a big ticket item. You're doing a great job in monitoring, making our money work for us better, and I totally appreciate you.
Thank you, Councilmember Crean.
Councilmember Loudon.
Were there any other bids?
So as part of the initial bidding process, SFS reached out to multiple engineers early on. And because Terracom was the lowest and most responsive bid at that point, they were extended this bid opportunity.
Thank you.
You bet.
Anyone else? I heard consent. Everyone okay with that? Okay.
And I would just say that we've had, I don't know if we mentioned, we had our first pre-construction meeting with Sands Construction 2 weeks ago now. So the final version of the construction contract is on my desk, ready for last look and signature. And then we were looking at kind of critical path and schedule for the improvements, which we hope to, I think should be finalized and updated, and we can probably share when we get to the July City Council meeting, looking at setting a groundbreaking date, probably the first week of August or so.
Thank you.
Thanks, Laura and Penn. Our final action item this evening is consideration of a design contract for 55th Street from Lamar to 165 feet east of Maple from Celia Duran. That's fun.
Take it away, Hillary.
Yeah.
Good.
Mhm.
Good.
Good.
So, as you know, during recent budget discussions, there's been discussion about accelerating the residential street program and depending on available funding. So looking down the list, 55th Street has a poor pavement condition, poor sidewalk, poor curb. So when you take a look at all the different modes of traffic, you know, vehicles and pedestrians, that really rises to the top of the list. So we probably would have recommended, we would have recommended this for design next year, but accelerating and trying to get this going to see what we can do. If we have available funding for construction in 2023, we thought we would go ahead and begin design. The scope of work for 55th is similar to what we've been doing for our full depth reconstruction. Since the pavement ranges from 3 inches to 8 inches, don't know why. I don't know how that happened in between. We're going to do a full depth pavement reconstruction similar to what we did in Countryside. Curb and gutter, sidewalk, retaining wall and driveway approach removal and replacement, and stormwater improvements or repair. So all the stormwater pipe on the east side of the project is all 4s and 5s, which mean close to failure. So we will replace those. So if this task order is approved, we will begin design for construction potentially in 2023. However, we've had a number of utilities reach out to us in years past saying, I can't wait till you do this project. We want to go ahead and relocate. So if that happens, it may be delayed. Brent has sent out an email and we're waiting to hear back from them. And so typically what happens is our engineer does about 60% design. And then we reach out to the utility companies and they base their design on ours so that they make sure that stormwater, inverts and everything don't conflict. And so that's why there would be a delay. We'll still try to push it as much as we can to get it done, but it just depends on those utilities likely. The good thing about this project is that we can also phase it if we get to the end and we have the entire design and it's, we could bid alternate and see how expensive it is and maybe build it half at a time. So it just depends on the finances that we have available. We do currently have 4 streets planned for 2023 that are already in the design process. So this would be additional street if we can get it done in 2023. So when I requested the costs from Olson, I was surprised at the cost that came back at the first look at it. They're submitting their services for $210,588. And so when you look at 61st Terrace, that's only $152,094. So bear with me with these details, but basically the way they, it depends on the scope of the project. Like 61st had a lot of floodplain and culverts, and 55th has retaining walls and things like that. But 61st Terrace, I'm going to give you a lot of detail, so I apologize, but this will kind of hopefully explain why it's more expensive. So 61st Terrace is 1,000 feet less in length. It has 2 intersections and 27 driveways. 55th Street has 9 intersections and 41 driveways. So every intersection you have to design and make sure it drains and calculate all the curb elevations. Driveways you have to do plan and profile because when you design the road, you have to look at the driveway and tie back in. So every driveway needs to be surveyed and designed accordingly. This also has a retaining wall. And then Ames was really off. And so it shows the right of way. Either it's just off a little bit or we don't have a lot of right of way on one side. So Olson conservatively estimated that we may need temporary construction easements for all the driveways, which is 46 properties. So that was an additional $34,434, which it probably isn't going to be spent. We're probably not going to need all those, but we just wanted to be conservative just in case. And then we included the $13,000 to bid separately and have construction phase items and bidding items, just because we don't know if we can combine this one with all the other projects that we have going. Because typically we like to bid in January so that we get really good prices before the contractors get busy and have their own schedule. So all of that, I did another little calculation. 61st Terrace based on the length would be like $102 per lineal foot. 55th was 84 per lineal foot. And then if you look at design as a percentage of construction, typically, and it depends on the scope, typically it could be anywhere from 8 to 15%. And 61st Terrace was 15% and 55th is about 12%. So looking at that, I feel like this is a really good number, even though it's higher than I would like to see. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or discussion? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Celia. Just wanted to say thank you. This is such a heavily used street that I think every resident in Mission at some point, utilizes on a weekly, monthly basis, and yes, everyone will feel this. So, and for folks that are new on council, we've had 2, maybe 3 stormwater failures on 55th in recent years. So this is exciting. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
It is mentioned in part of this response summary that based on the funding available, it could be potentially constructed in phases if necessary. Is that what the plan is then?
So I'm not sure, what's our decision on whether we have the construction funds available to do the whole thing next year? Notice how I'm putting her on the spot.
I think, so at our August committee meeting, when we really start to put together the next 5-year CIP, that's when we're going to look at what available funding do we have, what opportunities do we have to accelerate, whether that's through use of other funds or potential grant funds or the debt issuance to do that. So we'll really kind of engage in that. I think a lot of the phasing could be dictated by what we find out from the utilities in terms of what they want to do and the schedule on which that they want to do it. I know Celia and I were talking about we have to get at least to, I think I heard you say 65% design for them to start designing. And then they will want to know that we are committed and when we are committed to funding so that they can coordinate their construction appropriately. So we've got to get, this is, and as she mentioned, this is the next highest priority street really in the program. So we're not leapfrogging over anything, but there may be some timing considerations as we move through this, and then we'll be able to make those funding decisions more completely.
Thanks.
How's that?
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? Councilmember Davis.
I don't know how this affects St. Pius in terms of the project, but I know that that's a fairly important functioning element there. And I don't know how it's going to interrupt their traffic flow and so on.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that and reach out to them early, since, you know, it's nice to coordinate around those kind of types of
Right. And
entities.
this is premature, I'm sure, but with the CIP, are you going to kind of give us an outline of like the next steps after 2023
The streets.
in terms of the streets that are prioritized?
I can give you a draft plan. I've talked to Laura about potentially getting a pavement condition company in, similar to what we did with Stantec, just so we can take a look at the numbers, because it's been about the 5-year point. So I want to get that in there just to reaffirm our project prioritization, and maybe some things will change. So I can give you a draft, but it's subject to change based on finances and conditions.
And we've been talking about when is the appropriate time in the course of a calendar year to get that in front of you and reevaluate, so that if there is any adjusting that we need to do in that schedule, and we haven't landed on what the appropriate time is, but you'll start to see some of that. We needed to get a couple of years of experience kind of under our belt to really see if the Stantec numbers are holding or what our experience is in the field. But I think as we move through this, we'll be much more confident in that regard.
I think also what we learn from these projects that we're doing this year in terms of the impact on the residents is an important learning process to see what we can expect for the next couple of years.
Right. And we're planning to submit a survey after the project is done this year, so we can get some feedback from the residents. And of course, Ken has experienced it up close and personal. So, you know, we've been talking about the residents and some of their thoughts on it. So I think that'll be really helpful to bring forward.
Councilmember Inman.
Thank you. I just have a comment. I appreciate you getting together with the other utilities, because there's nothing that irritates me as a taxpayer is when we put nice new surfacing down and then somebody comes in and tears it up.
Yes.
Lamar.
Right. We're trying to best as we can to avoid that.
Yeah.
I'd recommend that we take this to council. I don't know if you want to do it on regular agenda just to let people know.
I think it's a sizable task order and we'd like it to be visible. Yeah. Okay, regular agenda.
Thank you. And I'll be sending out a letter, you know, to the residents, just notifying them, because they'll be seeing survey flags out that we're going to do that. So they'll be aware at least that we're in design. So let me get my note.
Okay, thanks, Celia. There are no discussion items on the agenda this evening. Laura, are there any department updates for the Community Development Committee? Welcome back.
Thank you. So I've got a couple project updates. Rock Creek, if you've been by there lately, they're starting to lay block. It's going a little bit slow because they're working around that sanitary sewer concrete encasement, but they've got some blocks down and moving forward. So they're going from the west to the east. So if you stop by there, you'll see some work, you know, progressing. Outlook, we've had a lot of delays. At first, after we removed the pavement, we had some rain. And then really what we found out is we removed an extra 6 inches of the subgrade. But with all that runoff that's been coming down the street all those years, it was just really wet. So we couldn't get the density or the compaction. So we had to wait. And I know some of the residents are like, what are you doing? Let's get going. But that's kind of what we've been waiting on. And now we're kind of down to only a couple small spots. So we're hoping with this really hot weather, it dries it out. So tomorrow we're going to be They had to hand out flyers today to notify the residents, but they're kind of trimming the grade tomorrow and getting it ready for curb on Friday and potentially Saturday if they don't get it done on Friday. And then pavement will be next Thursday and Friday. They may work on the driveways in between before the pavement. It just depends on if they can get the concrete crews out there. So once we do that, then we'll be moving on to reeds. So we're getting close, making progress. As far as Johnson Drive, we've marked out all the concrete to be removed. You'll see the paint if you walk down there. And then the crew's coming in to cut all the concrete, just cutting it. And then next week they'll start removing, and then a crew will fall behind to replace. And they've already changed the sequence. So now instead of starting at Lamar and going east, they're starting on the south side of Johnson Drive, moving west to Lamar, and then they'll start at Lamar on the north side and go back. So we're working on some flyers to hand out to people.
Okay.
There will be some lane drops as they work down the street.
This has nothing to do with east of Lamar, but it does have something to do with west of Lamar. We've got some curb degradation issues going on in the center portion with big chunks sitting out. And I don't know what's caused that or what, but could you at some point kind of check on it and see if there's anything we can do within the current budget, or what our next step is with that particular area?
In the medians. Yeah, it's probably similar to Row, where all the concrete was bad concrete and just deteriorated. And we did some patching on it. I don't know if you've noticed, it's not beautiful, but at least it's kind of holding together. We hope it will for the winter. So we'll take a look at that.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Celia?
Thank you.
And Laura, any further updates?
Pretty exciting week for us. We've got Moonlight Swim coming up this Friday, July 8th. It's at the MFAC from 7 to 10 p.m. The best part of this is you don't have to wear sunscreen and can go swimming all night long. Somebody need to break out to sing all night long. Features and concessions will be available, and it is a $7 admission. And then the next day, Saturday, July 9th, we've got our Mission Summer Family Picnic. It's the event many of us look forward to every year. That'll be held at Broadmoor Park from 6 to 9 p.m. And that is free to any and all visitors. So invite your family, friends. Had a lady call me today and asked if her non-resident family members could show up. And I said, yes, we will feed them too. So it's grilled dinner, family activities, live music, and beer garden. There'll also be Consolidated Fire District number 2 there, spraying water on people.
All right.
Anticipate it being around 90 degrees that day. So hopefully by the time it kicks in, it'll be a little bit cooler. No rain.
All right.
Yes, we planted those last year. Just kidding. They've been. Thanks.
Thanks, Ben. And anything else, Laura? Okay. It is now 7:09 p.m. and with no further discussion, this concludes the meeting of the Community Development Committee. Again, this video will be made public on our website at missionks.org. Thank you very much.
All right, it is now 7:09 p.m. and I'd like to call this meeting of the Finance and Administration Committee to order. While this meeting is being held in person in consideration of the ongoing COVID-19 health concerns, we are offering the option for the public to participate through Zoom if preferred. Instructions on how to attend virtually are included on the City Council calendar item listed on the front page of missionks.org. The public is also invited to participate in this meeting. If you're participating through Zoom, please either add your comment in the chat feature and it will be read out loud, or note that you would like to speak and we will call on you shortly to make your comment verbally. Please remember your comments and questions are visible to everyone in the meeting. If you are part of our in-person group tonight, please raise your hand and stay seated, but we will call on you to go to the lectern and make your comment. When you make your comment, please state your name and city of residence for the record. Also, please be conscientious of others trying to speak and speak slowly and clearly. This meeting will be recorded and posted on the city's website at missionks.org. Please contact the admin offices at 913-676-8350 with any questions or concerns. Ms. Randall, will you please call the roll?
Davis.
Here.
Chosey.
Here.
Kring.
Here.
Loudon.
Here.
Thomas.
Here.
Boltinghouse.
Here.
Ryherd. And absent. That's it.
Inman's here.
Oh, sorry, Inman. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now proceed with our agenda. Our first item of business is public comment. Is there any member of the public who would like to comment now?
There's no one online.
All right. We do not have any public presentations tonight either, so we will now proceed with our regular agenda. Our first action item this evening is the acceptance of the meeting minutes from Emily Randall.
Yes, those were in your packet for your review.
Recommend
Consent.
consent.
Consent. Sounds good with me. All right. Our next item is a contract for crossing guard services for the 2022-2023 school year from Chief Madden.
Thank you. Since 2016, we have contracted with All City Management Services to provide crossing guards at Highlands Elementary as well as at 51st and Lamar for the Russian Elementary students. Through that, I'd like to extend that contract this year. This year is a little bit different since the anticipated construction and demolition and construction of the Russian Elementary School. So went back to the vendor and asked if we could update the contract language to account for any changes that we may have throughout the school year. If there's any delays, we don't want to box ourselves in too tight to any date certains, just in case we have. And also it will give us an opportunity to evaluate the school districts and bus companies' plans for how they're going to transport students in the event that we still feel like we need to provide a crossing guard at that location. We will still have the ability to do so, but we will also still have the ability to give with notice, cancel that location. So staff recommends approving contract for an amount, estimated annual cost of $19,771.20. This is approximately 10.7% increase from last year, but the labor market is dictating the increases. We are only charged for the services they provide. So if their guard calls in sick or doesn't show and one of our officers or CSOs has to provide that service, we are not billed for that. So I would anticipate if everything stays on track with Rushton, which it sounds like they announced everything is on track at the open house this evening, and we do not need to provide a crossing guard, then that number will be significantly less for this next school year.
Any questions for Chief Madden? Like Ken first, then Debbie.
If there's a question, go ahead.
I was just going to comment. We were at the open house also, Ken and I, and it looks like when Christmas break is over, they will go to Westward View and will not return to Rushton until the fall of 2024. So that would leave that whole year empty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's correct. I was at the open house later tonight too, and that's what they told me.
I'd recommend we take it to consent.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. All right. That concludes our action items for this evening. We do have one discussion item to review, which is continued review and discussion of our 2022 estimated and 2023 budgets. Ms. Smith, will you please provide your report?
So budget memo number 3. And really, I don't have a lot of new information to share on kind of the general fund discussion this evening. It's going to be primarily focused on the other funds. We're continuing to work on general fund, particularly the supplemental requests. We did get, I think I shared with you all last week, at least an indication. It's not a perfect answer, but at least an indication that initially we are not going to be liable for repaying the kind of the back liability on the dark store theory. We'll see what happens with the way that Supreme Court handled that. And hopefully that will hold, but that's I think I spoke with several of you after the meeting last week or the work session last week that in putting the 2022 budget together, we made a specific decision to not set aside that amount separately, but should we face repayment, that would have been taken out of our general fund 25% reserves. The total that was updated last week was about $372,000. So about what we had expected. So hopefully we get to hang on to that. So as I mentioned this evening, we'll talk about, and we're also looking at pulling together some of the information that Councilmember Kring had requested on the general fund about anything that we've applied for or received grant funding for. There are some opportunities in the general fund. This year in particular, there was an opportunity with some CARES Act funding or ARPA funding for a child watch grant. And so we're using that to supplement or offset some of our expenses in our Mission Summer program, which will be, excuse me, of benefit. And so continuing to work on that, we'll see if we can make the numbers better as we move through the next month or so. But tonight we want to talk about some of the other non-capital infrastructure funds. As I mentioned, when we get to our August 3rd, so we'll have a conversation tonight. We'll take a break for the balance of July, talking about budget. We'll all be hard at work putting together the next 5-year CIP, kind of remaining steps in that budget. So tonight, typically we come back at the end and talk about these other non-capital infrastructure funds, which are included as a part of our budget. They don't represent all of the funds that we have, but the other funds that we don't talk about are generally custodial funds where we don't really have any control. We're required to set up those funds, whether that's a bond fund or there's a fund, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, where if asset seizure for the police department goes in and is held in certain places. So we don't typically talk about those funds as a part of the budget process. When you get the big spreadsheet towards the end of the process, you'll see all of those funds together. But we talk about the Equipment Reserve and Replacement Fund, the Special Alcohol Fund, the Mission Convention and Visitors Bureau or MCVB Fund, the Solid Waste Utility Fund, our TIF and CID funds. And this year, the ARPA Fund as kind of the other non-major funds, but those where we have some discretion and where we have some other expenses that have been transitioned. Excuse me. So the first we'll talk about tonight is our Equipment Reserve and Replacement Fund. And this was a fund that was established when we were putting the 2017 budget together as a way to really be able to more clearly track our expenses related to vehicles and equipment. So we've maintained a 10-year equipment and replacement cycle and schedule for many years in all of our operating departments. And I think I mentioned during the last work session, that's we look at maintenance costs, we look at anticipated useful life. We build in that replacement cycle. But when you see the references, for example, in the budget memos, and it says this vehicle or this piece of equipment is X number of years past its scheduled replacement, that's what we're referring to. So we try to keep those on that schedule so that we're not playing catch up. And we've had some success with that. So we recommended establishing that Equipment Reserve and Replacement Fund, which is allowed under Kansas statutes. And it helps us, in theory, build up potentially reserves to be able to have those offload kind of those larger capital expenditures outside of the general fund. Because what we were finding was when we included those in the capital line items in the general fund, if we were buying a street sweeper, for example, in a particular year, we were buying the entire fleet of police vehicles, it caused these larger swings in the annual, expenditures. And so our goal is to try to level those off, be able to plan for those effectively. So what we haven't been able, if we keep moving forward in the direction that we would really like, we would be, in theory, making a transfer into that fund every year to kind of build up those reserves. We made a transfer in the first year that the fund was established. And since then, we've been able to recover enough through the resale of our vehicles and equipment to kind of eliminate that need for a general fund transfer into that fund, but that could be a possibility in the future if we start to see a change in return on the sale of those assets. So as you can see, so we transferred that $200,000 back in 2017. We look at that every year. The equipment reserve and replacement fund worksheet, which is included in your packet. It's the first fund worksheet. Reflects about $246,000 in equipment, vehicles and equipment requests. All of those were shown in the supplemental spreadsheet that we shared the last 2 work sessions. As you can see, that $246,000 can be accommodated in the equipment reserve and replacement fund in the 2023 budget without a transfer from the general fund. Don't have a lot of cushion at the ending fund balance, but that's okay. I wanted to point out that in conversations with Celia and her staff, you will see the Boss Snow Raider. I still can't get used to that name. Kind of cracks me up, which is the smaller sidewalk snowplow. We're going to recommend, we're showing that as a purchase in the current fiscal year. So as we've talked about, when we go through this budget process, we will adopt a revised 2022 budget and the proposed 2023 budget, just based on supply chain constraints and the opportunity to have that equipment here for this winter season. Assuming everything holds together, our recommendation is going to be that we go ahead and purchase that piece of equipment this year. So it's actually $246,000, 2023, and that $18,000 added to the equipment in 2022. Covered in the memo, just wanted to highlight that there were 2 vehicles on that supplemental wish list, which are not yet included in these recommendations. And that is the Ford F-250 truck for the Public Works Assistant Superintendent and the replacement vehicle for the Community Services Officer and Animal Control. 2 reasons you may remember from the notes section on the supplemental requests. We really want to evaluate on that additional vehicle for the Assistant Superintendent. Now that we're fully staffed in Public Works, we have more people available to be out on job sites than we have vehicles in order to service that. But we may be able to transition to that without purchasing a new vehicle this year. So we're evaluating kind of the rotation within the fleet, or is there an opportunity to hang on to another vehicle? And we'll come back with that kind of final recommendation a little bit later in the budget process. And then I think as we've talked about the replacement vehicle for the Community Services Officer, it's oversized for the work that they do. And ideally, we would like to downsize that, but they are not without a vehicle currently. And one of the things that, we're evaluating is when would our next scheduled replacement of that vehicle have been? Because one of the things that we have communicated with the other communities that we contract with for animal control services is that as we go, one of the expenses associated, and the largest expense other than personnel associated with that, is the vehicle that's required for that. So they anticipate that periodically they will be sharing in the cost of the replacement of the vehicle. We're a little bit off cycle, so we want to see, we're evaluating how far off cycle and when it might make the most sense, whether it's this year or another year. But again, that vehicle could also be one, if we want to make that transition this year, could be one that could be passed down to the Public Works Department as well. So we're trying to look at all the alternatives there. We're always sensitive to what I affectionately refer to as fleet creep, and making sure that we are clear anytime we're adding vehicles or hanging on to vehicles longer, because at some point down the road, we'll have a request to replace those. Any questions on Equipment Reserve and Replacement Fund? Okay. Next, we look at the Special Alcohol Fund. And by state statute, Kansas imposes a 10% liquor drink tax, or the alcohol tax, on any alcohol sold by clubs, caterers, drinking establishments, and based on population, and then it's allocated. So the 30% of those revenues stay with the state, and 70% of the revenues come to the city. Based on our population, the state statute then prescribes that we take that allocation and it must be split in thirds. So a third, no more than a third can be allocated to the general fund, a third to a special parks and recreation fund, which is one that we consider as a part of our capital infrastructure program, and then the special alcohol fund. So the special alcohol fund is by statute supposed to be used to support programs whose principal purpose is alcoholism and drug abuse prevention or treatment of persons who are alcoholics or drug abusers or are in danger of becoming alcoholics or drug abusers. We saw just a slight decrease in alcohol tax fund revenues with COVID-19, but they recovered very quickly. And total distributions to Mission in 2022 are estimated to be $270,000. So we take that $270,000, we divide it in thirds. And so a third of that comes into, $90,000 comes into the special alcohol fund. We are expecting to see an increase. We just have continued to see an increase in those, and we're anticipating about $375,000 in revenues for 2023. So the allocation to this fund would increase to approximately $125,000. Historically, we've used those funds to support DARE program activities, our mental health co-responder program in recent years, and then the UCS's Drug and Alcoholism Council recommendations. That we are not equipped as a smaller entity to be able to allocate those funds in accordance with state statute to the larger programs. So UCS, I think some of you haven't seen the UCS recommendations, but may be familiar with those. So the Drug and Alcoholism Council offers grants each year to various organizations to provide those alcohol and drug abuse prevention and treatment programs. And so the grants are structured in a way that most cities are contributing at least some portion of their special alcohol dollars to the UCS grant program. And then they have a committee that awards those grants. We have a representative from Mission who sits on that Drug and Alcoholism Council and is involved in that evaluation process. And then ultimately, each governing body has the opportunity to see the list of recommended grants in a particular year. And then we can approve that, or we can recommend adjustments. So if there's a grant that's awarded, it's been a long time. Councilmember Kring will probably remember that there have been years in the past where the governing body did not allocate any funds, or they requested specifically that our dollars not be spent with a particular agency or on a particular grant program. We haven't seen that in, I would say, probably 15 plus years. But again, you see that they ask in the budget process, we commit, and then their allocation of grants occurs later in the year. And those come forward, I think, typically closer to a November or December timeframe. In the 2023 budget, you'll see it includes a recommendation to contribute $60,000 to the Drug and Alcoholism Council, which is an increase over the current year of about $10,000. What we see and what they see is a continued just increasing need for those. Approximately $15,000 is allocated to offset expenses associated with the DARE program, or has been historically. We do not currently have a designated or trained DARE officer on staff since Officer Fleur's retirement. So we eliminated those expenses in this current fiscal year. I know the chief has been in conversation with our local elementary schools and principals who continue to be interested in us providing DARE programs or resources in the future. And then finally, in 2021 and 2022, funding for the Johnson County Mental Health Co-Responder Program was increased to allow us to hire a second co-responder position. There continue to be sufficient resources in the Special Alcohol Fund to cover the cost of that second co-responder, which we feel is a really important resource, both for our police department and our community. You'll see a reduction in the 2022 estimated costs, and that's a result of a grant that was secured to offset some of those costs. So we aren't having to expend, we didn't submit that grant. I believe the City of Merriam Miriam was successful in securing that. But we get to share in those savings. And then there was also a lapse in the timing of getting the second co-responder hired and trained and in the field. So that's why you see the reduction in the 2022 estimated expenditures. It's not a cut back on the program, but some savings this year. This continues to be an important priority for us, and we will continue to work with the other partner cities to look for grant opportunities to help us stretch those dollars as far as we can. So any questions, comments on the special alcohol fund?
Yeah, one comment, just really pleased that we're able to continue the mental health co-responder program and that we were even able to utilize some grant dollars from our neighboring city on that. So very proud of that program. Glad we're doing it. Congratulations.
And I know we had a I know we had a presentation several years ago. In fact, it might have been one of our longest Zoom meetings ever at the initial onset of the pandemic. But would it be helpful at some point for us to bring back and kind of share so that newer council members have a more complete understanding of that? Would you like to have that presentation again? Okay.
I just wanted to take this opportunity to raise the question of maybe finding a more effective program other than DARE. Well, it's the program that they use in elementary schools, but it's really been proven to not be very effective. And so there are other programs out there, but then I guess it's a matter of getting the school board on board with reviewing new programs. So I don't know how.
I would support that, Lee. I've thought for a long time that, I'd be curious what, Chief has to share with us about the program and its success, here, but, I'm sure I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, because I've asked Laura the same question, but really, I think it's just a name that, has just continued with, services that are consistent in other places. It's just a name that has stayed through the years. Laura, please tell me.
And I haven't, well, and I, in doing agenda review this afternoon with Councilmember Chosey and Loudon, and I did not give the chief a heads up on this. So he's welcome to come speak on it and here in a minute, but it is kind of a placeholder that we've had. So I think that connection to our elementary schools and some form of education is really important. I don't have a problem. I'm confident he doesn't have a problem removing the DARE label and probably exploring. I was sharing that several years ago, we actually took a proposal to the school district for an alternative to DARE. And they were reluctant to, I don't know how involved you were with that at the time, but they were reluctant to move that forward just because of the time that they felt like they had to invest in a review of that curriculum. But I don't know if that's, again, I don't know if that's changed, but do you want to share anything else, Chief?
I'd just like to add that, obviously I'd be willing to look at other programs that are there. The DARE program it's not the DARE program that we went through, the Just Say No. It has evolved into a more, community building and just other types of situations than what the traditionally is you would think of as a DARE program. But again, be willing to look at any solution that keeps our relationship in our schools. I think that really helps build community and just that trust between the police and our children and their families.
Absolutely.
Councilmember Chosey.
Yeah, I'd really support taking a look at anytime we're doing like a public health intervention, making sure we're, looking at evidence-based interventions that are shown to be effective. And I shared some of the concerns Councilmember Loudon had. I've done some reading and I realized they've updated the curriculum from the ones that we all know and love. But in general, I would support making sure that we're doing the most effective thing with our dollars.
Yeah, Highlands will be getting a new principal this next school year, so I haven't had the opportunity to meet with them yet. They'll be back in the office later this month. My conversation with the principal at Rushton, she was very pro DARE program and just having that person that they can go to when they're having problems with a family or a student, and just trying to bridge the gap between what the school district's limitations are and what they can do, as well as just general problem solving. Well, some of which will correct itself with parking and traffic issues that they contend with, but so that should be corrected with the new design. But she was very very insistent that we get that relationship back up and running, and so we're working on identifying some candidates, but we can also look and evaluate programs and see if there's any changes that the school district has made to allow for other programs, or if they've really given the schools themselves the autonomy to deal with that.
Councilmember Davis.
Can you say that this fund that's allocated to DARE, it's primarily funds for personnel time? Is that and material?
I'd say it's mostly material, with the graduation T-shirts and giveaways and just the handout type of things that they use. And I don't know specifically if maybe that's been updated with not so much handout material now that students are issued electronic devices. I just don't know the answer to that.
Okay, thank you. That was what my question was.
Oh, there is a DARE item. I didn't.
So do you know what portion of the personnel of a FTE is involved in that?
Quarter of their time.
25%,
Yeah,
is that
about
what you said?
25%. I think Brian says about a quarter of the time.
Okay,
Salary and officer.
plus benefits. Okay, okay, thank you.
Yes, Hillary.
Thank you. Chief, I just wanted to add, I don't think anyone up here wants to see us take any money away from having our officers in schools. I think it's really just a name thing. So I just wanted to make sure you know that.
Sure. Yep, we'll do some research.
Any further questions for Chief?
Okay, then we have the Mission Convention and Visitors Bureau Fund. So that fund was created or established by ordinance back in 2009 and replaced the former Mission Business Development Committee Fund, which, for a bit of trivia, was established in August of 2003 when Target came to town and asked, I believe, for not a TIF or CID, but basically a sales tax rebate incentive that was granted by the council. And the council at the time said, if we're going to do that, we also then want to take a comparable amount once Target is open and generating sales tax dollars, and set aside those sales tax dollars to reinvest in the community in some fashion. So it was a combination of events, Spirit of Mission Days, Arts and Needs Festival, all those kinds of things, along with the introduction of the Business Improvement Grant Program. And so it was about $450,000 in total that was kind of pulled off of general fund sales tax receipts in order to fund that. We have since transitioned that Business Improvement Grant Program into the general fund. And so rather than siphoning off sales tax receipts and putting it in the MBDC fund, we just handle all of that within the general fund currently. In 2016, the council sort of transitioned from that Mission Business Development Committee to a Mission MCVB, or Mission Convention and Visitors Bureau Committee. And there's a statutory requirement to maintain a separate fund to account for transient guest tax receipts that are collected. It was about that time that we got our first hotel in Mission there at I-35 and Fox Ridge. And so in order to be able to charge the transient guest tax, we had to create that special fund. We have that transient guest tax now established at 9%. You'll often hear it called a hotel or motel tax. And so that transient guest tax is charged in addition to sales tax on any hotel room. As we've talked about previous iterations of the Gateway development and a hotel that may be there, you may recall that have been proposals in the past for a sharing of that transient guest tax revenue stream. We are currently at the maximum rate allowed under current state statute. And that was established through actually a charter ordinance. So transient guest tax funds can be used to attract residents and visitors to our community and to spend dollars in support of our local businesses. So since its creation and the implementation of the transient guest tax, we've primarily used the funds to produce the Mission magazine each year. We are able through that to offer affordable discounted advertising for our local businesses. We restrict, unless you are a business like Advent Health or someone else who's serving the entire community, the ads that we sell as a part of that are restricted to our local Mission businesses only. So it's a great service for them. And then it's a great way. We also mail outside of our community. So we mail and distribute about 14,000 copies of that magazine. Inside our own community, it's about double what we would have in our residents. So we've looked at and established a distribution kind of in Prairie Village, some Merriam, some Overland Park, some Fairway, some Roland Park. Those people who would be most likely in flipping through that Mission magazine to come frequent our businesses, restaurants, et cetera. But those funds can also be allocated for beautification type activities, wayfinding signage, other things like that within our commercial districts. The MCBB fund also previously served, and this was a carryover from the MBDC, for revenues and expenses associated with our family adoption program. In 2021, and we had a pass-through for the Mission Business District. So the merchants group, particularly along Johnson Drive, felt more comfortable collecting their fees and sponsorships from their members and for us to handle the accounting for that. We returned in 2021, we distributed those funds back to them. They've had kind of a change in leadership and they felt more confident managing those finances. We were happy to turn over that responsibility back to them. So we're no longer serving in that capacity. And then there are plans this year, we have established a separate fund for the family adoption program. So we can have a very clear picture about what's brought in terms of revenues and the expenses associated with that. Since 2017, back in 2017, we established a fund with the Greater Kansas City Charitable Foundation, which allowed us to kind of come under their 501c3 umbrella and do fundraising that offered some additional tax benefits for those folks who might be contributing to family adoption program. We've used it for the Celebration Tree program, other sponsorships that we have throughout the year. We haven't, since 2017, we haven't asked for a reimbursement out of that fund. And we're ready to make that reimbursement. In fact, I got a call from the Greater Kansas City Community Foundation that said, hey, we'd really like for you to make a distribution out of your account. So in looking at that and allocating that appropriately, the anticipated reimbursement to the MCBB fund is about $75,000, which is a little bit higher than what we actually anticipated last summer when we put the budget together. And so that allows us a little bit more flexibility to consider the funding of additional supplemental requests, such as banners for 2023. In the past, we've also discussed, and I'm sorry that Councilmember Thomas had to leave before I said market site amenities. And e-bikes have also been discussed in previous year's budget conversations. And I know she raised at the work session last week, potentially an opportunity to look at shade in particular for market site improvements for 2023. So we're in the process of evaluating that. When you look at that fund worksheet for the MCBB fund, you'll see it could accommodate So we're showing at the end of 2023 a fund balance of about $46,900. So there's some flexibility there to potentially consider some of the other supplemental requests. And banners were the only thing that had been specifically identified on that list of supplemental requests. And you'll see those are included in the 2023 expenditures. I think Councilmember Boltinghouse, I think you have a couple of questions.
Yeah, I'll definitely back up or stand in for Hillary here and say market side improvements I think would be sorely welcomed, and especially the shade category for sure. I know a number of council members I see out there every week frying in the sun. I'm sure other people are feeling the heat too.
Mayor, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to encourage us to keep those e-bike or scooter pilots on our list. I know we had some discussions last budget cycle about a particular proposal that might not have been a great fit or more limited than what we were looking for the dollars that it would require. But if we could just keep that on the list to consider, that would be great.
Sure. Any other questions on the MCVB fund? Okay, solid waste utility fund. This is the one that was not included in your packet because we needed to do a little bit more work on it. And so it has been updated, and we'll update the packet online tomorrow morning, but I think everybody's familiar. So the solid waste utility fund was created when we established the solid waste utility fee, which is assessed to single family residential properties for the trash contract provided through WCA GFL currently, which offers trash recycling, yard waste, and bulky item collection for our single family properties. So we have funded that, and it's been a long time, and I didn't bring the mill levy history worksheet, and we'll review that again when we look at it. But there was a point in time in which we were providing that service and not charging any portion of that service back to our residents. And I can't remember the year, but it's been several years since we I think since we transitioned back and added that. And we funded that through a combination of fees collected from the residents, and then the city is making a transfer out of the general fund each year to help subsidize a portion of those costs. We talked a little bit at the last work sessions that WCA GFL has requested an increase of 5% for the 2023 contract. Included some contract language in the memo. And I think the key piece of that is, in no case shall an annual increase ever be greater than 3% without mutual agreement in writing of both parties. So that 5% increase is not automatic. The 5% increase is something we've seen that in the last couple of years. I think from a staff perspective, we're not uncomfortable with that request for the 2023 year. When we look at the consumer price index for garbage and trash collection service from the period of May 2021 to May 2022, that CPI is about 5.4%. So you're looking at, again, like we talked about last week, increases for personnel, increases for equipment. And I know there'll be questions. We've had some conversation already about kind of performance standards and expectations. But we currently collect fees from 2,972 households in Mission. The current rate for the annual rate that is billed to each of those households is $193.02. But that's $16 and some change per month is what it works out to. As we've looked at, we've increased and kept we've shared in and passed along some of the increases in past years because we were actually running with a negative fund balance in that solid waste utility fund for a couple of years. So there was a year where we increased our general fund subsidy to $110,000. And we've done some kind of cost sharing. Right now in the 2022 contract, residents are paying for about 96% of the total contract, and the city is subsidizing the rest of that. Now, there are a couple of other things. So one of the things that we were looking at since the packet went out Friday is what is our typical delinquency rate on that? And we're seeing a 5-year average of just a little over 3%. And so we've built in the proposed budget for 2023 and the estimate for 2022. So if you look at that solid waste fund page, which is included in this packet, you will see we budgeted for $573,000 in revenue from the solid waste utility in 2022. We've had most of our distributions, and we're estimating that we're only going to collect about $555,000 of that. So anybody who has delinquent taxes, because that solid waste utility fee is assessed on your property tax bill, anytime you have delinquent taxes, we don't get the solid waste utility fee until some later period of time. So you'll see the recommendation for revenues in 2023 is about that same level. So a piece of our subsidy is going to make up that delinquency, right? So we're not kind of shifting that burden to the residents. And then we also have some funds that are going towards the utility rebate. So as a part of our property tax and utility rebate program that we've offered for many years, the solid waste utility fee is something that can be rebated back to homeowners who qualify on an income basis. So in looking at refining these numbers, I think even looking at that 5% increase, and we've successfully built that fund balance back up, I think we could easily absorb and not increase the solid waste utility fee for our residents for 2023. We could hold it constant at the 2022 rate of $193.02. That's what's reflected in this budget at this point. And then we can actually reduce the transfer from the general fund, both in the 2022 year and the 2023 year, by $10,000 each year. So we're still we would be subsidizing $75,000 as opposed to $85,000. And you can see we still estimate that we would end with kind of a positive and healthy fund balance in that fund.
Yes, Councilmember Creed.
Is there any projection for that income guideline changing so that we would have more people in that income?
We can look at that if that's something you want us to evaluate, is whether that needs to be higher.
Yeah, when's the last time it changed? Do we know?
I don't know. Do you know, Brian?
It's based on federal standards, so it changes every year. So we look at the area median income for the Kansas City area. And I want to say we do 60%. You have to qualify 60% or below the area median income. So we're looking at that every year. But we change it if you like from a policy standpoint.
So we can bring back some alternatives about the financial impact of that if you wanted to
because the more
increase
people
that
qualify for that, we're going to need more money. Right?
Yes.
Yeah, Councilmember Chosey.
Yeah, I know this has been maybe brought up before, but I'd like to look into how we can provide equity to multifamily residents in terms of at least maybe the option for properties to get in on some of this cost sharing, or at least if nothing else, guarantee that we're providing recycling opportunities to multifamily where it's not where they're not served with that right now.
Yeah, I support that idea too.
What's that?
I support that idea as well.
Yeah. And yeah, I think this is one of the places where we can sort of make a direct impact on some of that property tax relief, you know, for certain residents. So that's a great call out.
Trent.
Yeah, sorry.
Councilmember Davis.
Couple things. First of all, on just sticking with this discussion on the rebate, how much of the funds are actually used out of that each year? Do you know, Brian?
So if you look at the actual for 2020 and 2021, it's about $2,200.
Okay.
Is what we've actually paid out.
So the applications are fulfilled basically based on this. So increasing that fund, you're still having, you're still under that level by the current applications. Is that correct?
Yes, but if you didn't go with 60% of area median income, if you went with something higher, for example, 80% or something, then you would be paying out what?
More.
No, you don't want to make it more restrictive. Yeah, you want to.
So you're letting higher.
You're letting people with higher incomes access your grant programs.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Fair enough. And then I was wondering about the delinquent tax. Who enforces that delinquency? Is that the county?
Yes.
And how is that done? And I know that that's off topic, but I was curious how that's being collected.
So it's collected in a variety of ways, but that's enforced by the county, and a property is allowed before the county really steps in to look at any sort of enforcement mechanism. A property is allowed to be delinquent in payment of their taxes for 3 years. And so oftentimes if a property goes into foreclosure, if a property is sold, those things will be caught up. But then if there's a situation where that cannot be resolved through some other fashion, then the county has the opportunity to sell that property on the court. You hear about the courthouse step sales, and that's typically the properties that are going there. I don't think that happens a whole lot, but that delinquency rate is not something that we have to wait.
Okay, thank you.
We have to wait and get in line with that. And then when those taxes are satisfied, we get a distribution.
Yeah, Mayor.
Do we see in the last recession a big jump in the delinquency rates?
No, not really.
Okay.
We've been pretty consistent. Our overall, I think we trend in somewhere between 95 to 98% collections in property taxes. So overall, I think our collection rate is pretty strong.
Yeah, can I ask a quick follow-up on that with the mayor real quick? So are we anticipating then, in light of a potential recession, that could stay stable?
Yeah, and we can go back and kind of see if it refine that a little bit more, but I think it's a pretty conservative estimate.
Gotcha. Yeah, Councilmember Redmond.
I think this is a great program, because I've lived in other cities here in Johnson County where you've got several different garbage trucks coming up and down your streets, and it takes a lot of wear and tear on the streets when you do that. And I think that I really like, we call it Big Monday at my house, where you can take out large items once a month. And I just think it makes the area look a lot cleaner, unless they miss that week. But other than that, I think it's a great program, and I hope we can sustain it.
Yeah,
Thank
I think,
you.
and I know in follow up to some of the questions that Councilmember Davis has asked in the last couple of work sessions, Brian and I are looking at the current contract to look at performance standards. And so again, if we go with the 5% increase, it has to be, again, mutually in writing. And so we'll want to make sure that we touch on some of those. But I don't think that some of the challenges that we've experienced I think and I haven't gone back to read the contract yet, but I think they have a certain amount of time within which to remedy. And while the performance issues are frustrating on the front end, they generally have been able to resolve those. So I think with those performance measures, so we may want to look at if there's something else we want to amend, but we'll be reviewing those before we send anything back to them in writing.
Councilmember Shozy, did you have a comment?
I'm good. That was about the performance.
Okay, TIF and CID funds. And these are a little messy right now. Brian and I are still kind of working on them. We have shown the TIF and CID funds. I'm just going to come out of the gate with the punchline because I've had several questions. We've adopted a budget with negative fund balances in those funds in the past. We are not distributing more than we are taking in. So there's some accrual issues and some accounting issues that we're going to look at and see if we can't clarify through this budget process so that the perception is not you're paying these developers more money than the city is taking in, right? So let me start with that. So work to be done there, but we're required to maintain separate funds for each of the development and redevelopment projects that have either a TIF, tax increment financing district, or a community improvement district associated with them. We have several active projects where we are paying out, collecting, and where those districts are generating increment or generating revenue. That's Mission Crossing, which is the Wellstone, Chick-fil-A, that Culver's, that center, Cornerstone Commons, which is Natural Grocer, and the other buildings associated with that. Mission Trails Apartments, so what happens on these TIF districts, and you'll see this, and so it makes it difficult to track sometimes, is the developer will make up a name for the project at the outset, and then it will change over time. And so we've transitioned. That's why no one would ever know that Mission Trails Apartments is the locale unless we identify it that way. But Mission Trails Apartments is the locale. And then we have a TIF district around Capitol Federal. That TIF district, when that land swap happened, and the previous Cap Fed, which was now where the transit center is located, purchased the property, or we did an exchange. TIF funds were allocated there to underground the utilities. That was important to them. So that's the only expenditure or reimbursement that occurs in relationship to the Capitol Federal project, which was really a beautification issue for the city as well. And we will be creating a fund in 2023 for the Mission Bowl project, but it's not yet generating any increment. So we won't have revenues and expenses, but we'll kind of create that placeholder fund for the Mission Bowl project. And so any of the distributions that we make out of there are made in accordance with the development agreement, and those distributions are made on a quarterly basis. We get the TIF property tax revenues come to us through Johnson County, and they're identified specifically by project. So we can see base value, increment generated, taxes collected, and that piece to be paid out. And then through the CID sales tax, those are also identified separately on the sales tax distributions that we receive from the state. So happy to answer any questions there. I just, the biggest thing is trying to get that to look like we're not paying out more than we're taking in.
I think it would be helpful to maybe have one of our work sessions devoted to understanding these a little bit better. I mean, you could do it now, but I think that would be something that I certainly would benefit from, just the flow of dollars and understanding how those are then distributed, especially from the variation of all these agreements and when does it start? And maybe including in some of this, the historical, what is it? When did it start? That sort of thing, just to get maybe the name change too, in terms of identifying that for us to.
Yeah, and we can't go back. So once the TIF district is established, we can't legally change
right,
it.
But
just
I mean,
identifying it in our process. And we actually have a document that started. We need to find the time, but I think that's a good suggestion. Our goal has been to kind of provide you with that overview that says not only what was the intent, how much was allocated, what incentives were used, what's the time frame, right? So is that 20 or 22 year period? And then what percentage of overall project costs were granted in incentives? We just need, and we can do that and come back.
Yeah,
and
just
that up for you.
Also to understand what is the return on investment for the city to do this.
Yeah.
Especially during the work session, as we're getting these additional housing renditions, and some are getting incentives, some of, like 51st Street has not asked for any. I'd like an understanding of where we stand collectively as a governing body on how you accept this over here, but not over. It would be helpful on the work session level, I think.
Okay.
Councilmember Chosen.
And just reiterating Councilmember Davis a little bit, it might be helpful for the public, especially, I think, just perusing these documents. I don't know if software limitations or what, legal limitations, but if we could add some clarifying text about what those funds are, what the locale is versus Mission Trail Apartments, and maybe the lifetime of the fund, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, we can add, we've got some narrative that typically goes ahead of these that we can certainly add back in to share with the public. Okay, the last fund on our list tonight is the ARPA fund. There's really not a lot. I know that it will be our goal as a staff to bring forward through this budget process a recommendation for allocation of those ARPA funds as we wrap up this budget. Even though we have a longer time period, we have until 2024 to obligate and 2026 to actually expend the funds. But I know the sooner we can sort of commit to what our priorities are and how we're going to allocate those, the better we can communicate that and move on and not carry that forward. Kind of just remaining steps. We talked about this briefly last week, but we just wanted to capture it here. Our next sort of impending deadline is internal for staff only, and that is to notify the county of our intent to exceed the revenue neutral rate and to provide them with the date for our public hearing, which we've established as September 7th. As I mentioned, the August 3rd Finance and Admin Committee, we will have the 2023-2027 5-year capital improvement program and a review of the infrastructure funds that support that. At that time, we'll also take a look and provide a snapshot of the current debt that the city is holding, because most of our debt is related to that 5-year CIP and those capital funds, as we talked about, I think last week. The general fund just carries the debt related to the acquisition of the streetlight network, which will be paid off in 2023, and now the debt service for the FCIP improvements. We will also, at that August 3rd meeting, we're anticipating a presentation from the Climate Action Task Force, along with their recommendations for the budget. Then August 17th, prior to our city council meeting, we'll have a community dialogue. Invite all your friends and family. And then I think I must have missed a page when I printed this. That budget work sessions, I believe it's the 24th and the 31st of August, tentatively scheduled. And then our public hearings on the budget overall and our intent to exceed the revenue neutral rate scheduled for September 7th with adoption of our budget at that same special meeting. So we would do that. And I think we've identified that ahead of the committee meetings that night. That would be a committee meeting night.
So 6 o'clock or 5?
I don't know. We need to look at that. That's the challenge with that is we have to be very specific when we publish the public hearing notice of the time of that meeting.
Right.
And so what we may want to do is, depending on your schedules, and I'll pull this next week ahead of when we need to provide this to the county. I know 5:30 can be challenging for some. So what we may want to do is set it for 6 o'clock and just push our committee meetings back to start at 7 so that we can accomplish the specificity that we need to in that public hearing notice. Okay. Any other budget thoughts, questions, comments for this evening?
Councilmember Davis.
Just a follow-up on the sales tax vote and the preparation. Is that going to be presented in terms of what material is going to be sent out and so forth with regards to the campaign?
Yes. I think Ms. Randall is working on we have the kind of our communications plan from the street sales tax, looking at that, probably aligning that. So I would imagine August committee meeting, we'll be able to kind of share that back with you.
Thank
you. Mm-hmm. And we're also still working on signage that we can get at the MFAC while we're still having people in the tennis courts. And then obviously when we start Mohawk construction, to remind people that this is what these sales, some of the things these sales tax dollars have paid for. And that's all I have for the budget this evening.
Thank you. Do you want to just give us any department updates?
Yeah, I think the chief has one. And Brian, did you have any? Okay. Emily, and you didn't have any? So just the chief.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure everyone was there with the retirement of Wayne Brinkley today. Well, today was the ceremony. It has left us without any animal control services for the time being. Just, I wanted you all to be aware of that in case you get any telephone calls from your constituents. We have extended an offer to replace Wayne, but our other CSO is on limited duty and can't perform animal control functions right now. So we're in the process of hiring an individual and hopefully be able to get him on board soon. But just wanted you all to be aware that as currently we won't have any animal control services available.
So Dan, who do we refer them to?
Well, we'll do our best to handle things over the phone with officers and supervisors, and we can still approve impounds of stray animals and things like that. But we wouldn't have the equipment to handle, more of if it's a dog bite situation, we're going to handle it like we would if the CSOs were off, but it's just the day-to-day calls that might not get as quick attention as we would like.
So how does that work, Chief, with the coalition that we have with the other some of the other cities? Do they pay us, right?
Yes, but they get a reduced rate when each year we go back and reevaluate. So we set a budget based on being fully staffed in animal control services. And then each year we evaluate what we've actually been able to provide. And then we're offering them a discount, which they can either take in the form of a repayment or a reduction in the next year or current year's fees. And so because we've had some staffing issues ever since we transitioned to that model, we've never fully collected all of those expenses. But the whole system, and this is the way that NEAC was structured for years before that, and we don't have an animal control officer on 24/7. And so each city knows that there will be periods of time where their officers may have to respond to an animal control within their own city. And so all that's factored in, and which is why you don't have all of them lining up saying, we want different service. They get, I think, value still for that investment.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Chief, I just wanted to say it was a great retirement today. Thank you very much. Very nice and well attended.
Yeah,
so
thank you. It's good to see some of those people from the past.
Well, it is now 8:11 p.m. and with no further discussion, that concludes this meeting of the Finance and Administration Committee. Again, this video will be made public on our website at missionks.org. Thank you very much.